Welcome back to the Adapt or Die podcast. I'm your host with the most, Armel Tala.
And I'm your host on the low, Ben Smith. This podcast is focused on one thing, finding practical ways to improve your health, wealth, and happiness.
As I like to say, you only peak once you stop trying. Thanks for joining us in our journey of lifelong learning.
And now it's time for the next episode of
The Adapt or Die podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the AOD podcast. Today we're going to be going over 0 to 1. This is the second part of our takeaway from the book. It's all about startups, all about seeing the world differently and being a contrarian.
And just to break it down a little bit more, today what we're talking about is luck versus success. So what role does luck play in succeeding? We're talking about the 7 startup questions. So these 7 questions that you have to answer before making a startup. Those are the main 2 things, but the last thing is going to be secrets, what you need to build a company. So all things startups today, and that's what we're talking about. But before we begin, Mel, how was your week?
It was a good week. We did a lot. Not a lot of luck in my life. Saw success, running hackathons, all the good stuff. But yeah, not too much for me. Just got a buttload of Chipotle for free. It's always nice.
You got like weeks worth, right?
Yeah, free catering. And then you over cater for. This is what you should do for events that you don't have to spend your money. Say you're gonna have a lot of people go there, so they over cater, and then you get to take things to home for free. It's the second time it's happened to me. Well, first time I got like 4 boxes of pizza. I wasn't even a part of the event. Now it's Chipotle. College is great. Take advantage of it.
I've never seen someone so happy to have beans. He was like, bro, I got so many beans. I was like, beans? He was like, do you know how hard it is to make beans, bro? I was like, oh, I guess so.
It's time consuming. You got to set it you got to, wait for it to soak. And then just having the ability to go in my fridge and be like, wow, I just have beans ready. I don't think anybody understands.
I definitely don't. That shit was funny, though.
With that being said, you are not a lottery ticket, Ben. Thought I was.
Yes. The first thing that Thiel talks about is that he says you are not a lottery ticket. And, what does he mean by that? He's talking about the difference between luck or the role of luck in success. And this was really interesting to me. And he kind of mentions a few successful people. So Warren Buffett considers himself part of the quote-unquote lucky sperm club. And Jeff Bezos says Amazon's success was due to the incredible planetary alignment of however his company worked out, right? And so it's interesting that these successful people say things like that because you would think that they would attribute more of their success to themselves, right? And so, Thiel comes to this rhetorical question of how much of success is due to skill and how much is due to luck. And here's some questions to think about. Do you think anyone who built a successful company did so by accident? Do you think they were lazy? Do you think they thought that it was impossible? How do you explain serial entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs? For those who don't know, he built Apple and Pixar, or Jack Dorsey, who built Twitter and Square. So it's people like these and questions like these that make you wonder, what is the role of luck? And
mind you, those are Steve Jobs and Jack Dorsey. Those are $2 billion companies.
Yeah, they're not like 2 baby companies. Each of them in their own right would be insanely impressive for someone to build, but for one person to build 2 of them is absolutely insane. For that to be luck, statistically, that's just so improbable to me. It's crazy. But the weird answer to the question of luck and the role of success is it doesn't matter. Stop thinking about it. Because your best strategy is to act on everything within your control and stop worrying about what you can't control, right? Attributing luck to success makes you less successful. All that does is it gives up control that you have over your life, right? And you need as much control as possible if you're going to succeed. So you really need to take control of your future, specifically your business or your entrepreneurship, whatever endeavors you have, to actually succeed. The more control that you have, or the more control that you think you have, the better off you are.
Like a true stoic, focus on what you can control. And so you have to ask yourself, what can you always control? And that is you. How do you spend your time? What activities are you in? What goals are you accomplishing? What are you focusing on? These are vital questions to ask yourself because a lot of the times you can get lost in the haze going day by day, but not actually evaluating how your days are being spent. And focusing on a few things is the best use of your time. I'm learning this because as someone, I'm an anti-essentialist, but I'm slowly shifting to the other spectrum. And some quotes that we liked from Peter Thiel was he says, instead of pursuing many-sided mediocrity and calling it well-roundedness, a definite person determines the one best thing to do, then does it. Another one, instead of working tirelessly to make yourself indistinguishable, being decent at many things, strive to be the greatest at something substantive, to be a monopoly of one. Again, we tying back to monopolies. So be ruthless. Cut things that out of your life that you truly don't need. Because does this activity actually is this activity absolutely necessary? Do I need to do this? Do I love this? Does this actually help me achieve what I want? Is this my highest point of contribution? The point here is progress is made by letting go of everything inessential and focusing on what is truly vital. Be ruthless with your time because time is the most valuable thing you have.
Wow, that was actually really profound. There's a lot of good questions in there. And I was just that made me think of. I know some of those I wrote, but even then, I was like, wow, like it's a good question. Dang. Anyways, moving forward, we all know that knowledge is power, or as I like to say, knowledge is potential power. But what knowledge do we need? And Thiel goes over a few different types of knowledge. The first one is conventional truths. This is knowledge that is well known. So you can think of most of math, a lot of math and physics, like Pythagorean theorem, Newton laws of physics, things that are very much known by everyone, right? Then he talks about mysteries. This is knowledge that is impossible to know. If you know anything about string theory, you know that it's actually improvable. So, we can't actually test the theory itself. So it's impossible to actually know if it's true or not. You can argue over religion and existence and why we're here. I would say that that's a mystery because no one can prove anything, right? And then the third type of knowledge is secrets. This is knowledge that can be obtained, but with great difficulty. And the key thing here is that everything that is a conventional truth used to be a secret. And so, what is a secret? Well, we don't know because it's a secret. And what used to be secrets is now a conventional truth. But what Thiel talks about is that secrets are what give you the advantage. Uh, Many of us, what we think is important are conventional truths. We try to educate ourselves thinking that, if I just have 3 degrees in, psychology, computer science, and I don't know, just throw econ in there for fun, I'll know so much about the world that I'll be unstoppable, right? But it's not the knowledge that is already known that gives you an edge. It's the knowledge that no one else knows. And so, while yes, it's important to know the basics, the foundations, the conventional truths, those are often just prerequisites for you to be able to find secrets. So an example would be something like if you're trying to make a truly intelligent computer, right? You have to know a lot of math. You have to know a lot about AI, computer science, maybe electrical engineering, things along those lines, right? But that alone will not allow you to find the secret, the new thing, the new technology that's going to break through and make AI truly possible, right? That's simply a prerequisite for you to be able to get there. And so the key point here, conventional truths are good, but you need to find secrets. Secrets are what give you the advantage.
Wow. It's like you find those secrets by building on top of those conventional truths. But sometimes you got to think in first principles and completely scratch the conventional truths. But why are secrets dying? Like, what is the death of secrets? And that's because people aren't really looking for secrets. Many of us act as if all that could be known is known. Believing secrets don't exist, it means you think the world is perfect. Improvements in technology, let me rephrase this. If you think the world is perfect, you think this way. Improvement in technology is impossible. Ethical knowledge has reached its peak. Life can no longer improve. Obviously, if you heard someone say this, you'd be like, what type of nihilist point of view do you have on the world? But why have we stopped believing in secrets? Like, what is stopping us from looking? One that Peter Thiel points out is geography. Everywhere on Earth has already been mapped and explored. So this lack of like territory to explore kind of gives us the psychological thinking of, well, maybe there is nothing out in the world to explore. Like we've already found everything, right? But it's like, yeah, we found everything, but do we know everything? Second is risk aversion. We're afraid of being wrong. I love this quote because I actually took it and phrased it in my own way. And this is what Peter Thiel says: if your goal is to never make a mistake, you shouldn't look for secrets. I tied this to basketball, saying, if your goal is to never miss a shot, you should never become a shooter. That is just beautiful. That's a beautiful quote from Theo. So thank you for giving me something to tweet. Second, well, still under risk aversion, but secrets are by definition unapproved by society. Being lonely but correct, that's difficult. So, you are lonely in this secret that you find, but it ends up being correct. It's still a difficult life to go through. But imagine that you believe something is a secret and you're wrong. That's being lonely and incorrect. That is an unbearable life. Third is complacency. Why search for something new when life is already good? This is another great quote. Every fall, top schools welcome the incoming class with the same implicit message. You got into this elite institution. Your worries are over. You're set for life. But that's probably the kind of but that's probably the kind of thing that's true only if you don't believe it. So essentially, what he's saying here is, if you think that because you get into a Harvard, Yale, Stanford, your life is set, well, that's only going to be true if you don't believe that. Because yes, those are great things to start off with. But if you follow that conventional path, you'll just be working for someone else. You won't actually be achieving one of your goals. So if you don't believe that, but you use that as leverage, you can get somewhere great. Fourth, last, flatness. The globe appears to be a single competitive marketplace of people. In other words, it is flat. So people assume that if secrets do exist, someone more ambitious, more intelligent, more creative would have already found it. Well, ask yourself, why are you thinking about that secret? Because they haven't found it. So this is one of the reasons why being complacent and just thinking that someone else will do it will never get you anywhere. So the point is, don't fall into these belief traps. Secrets are keys. Secrets are still out there, and they always will be.
One thing that I want to emphasize before continuing, I kind of said this, but I think I glossed over it a little too much, is that a secret is new technology. A secret is what gives a company the ability to become a monopoly. A secret is the advantage that gives you, a monopoly or market share over, a market, right? So examples would be Ford, when they created cars using the assembly line, or Google creating the most optimal search engine, Apple creating technology with unmatched design and aesthetic appeal, right? Those are secrets that they found that allowed them to be dominant in their markets, right? So, then now going back, people are no longer like looking for secrets, but we should, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we find these secrets? Well, there are two types of secrets according to Thiel. The first is a secret of nature. This is an undiscovered aspect of the physical world. Examples would be something like quantum theory or DNA. We didn't really know what DNA was until only a few centuries ago. So things like that. The second is secrets of people. These are things that people don't know about themselves or that they hide because they don't want others to know. Some examples would be the iPhone. Everyone wants one, but no one knew that they actually wanted one, right? That's a secret of people. Steve Jobs found that out, but no one else knew that. Another one would be that capitalism and competition are opposites. We talked about this last episode. Capitalism and monopoly is actually a synonym. And that's a secret of people. He talks about it, if you study it from an economics perspective, is also a secret of nature. So these can't overlap.
I want to add one thing. I just really want to thank Steve Jobs because I don't know what I would do if I was using Android right now. Every time I see someone using an Android, I cry a bit. I just think, how do you do it? Even Ben, I see him using the Windows or whatever that is, Dell. I cry. I'm like, I could not use a Mac. I got to use a Mac, man. Like, thank you, Steve Jobs. Like, I'm really crying over here because, like, Apple's just such a great company, man. I wouldn't work there, though.
Anyways, I make all my outlines on that Dell. So, um, no, then he talks about neither type of secret is more important. As you can see with Jobs' example, the iPhone. I mean, that was I don't even quadrillion dollar industry. I don't even know how big the iPhone is if you take like the total sales. But like he found a secret about people, and he wasn't the most technically gifted person, but he found out a way to create something that really drew people in, right? So it's not like secrets of nature or something that is more important than people or people more than nature. They're both important, right? And where do you find these secrets? It's kind of funny his answer. You find secrets where no one else is looking, and I'm like, yeah, that makes
That's so
sense.
true. Like,
I was looking for a little bit more in terms of like application, but I was like, fair enough. And he kind of goes over a couple things, I guess. He says, are there any fields that haven't been standardized or institutionalized? And one example he gives is nutrition. Nutrition matters for everyone. Nutrition, there's a ton of ambiguity, but many top scientists don't choose nutrition as their field, right? And so it's one of those fields. It's not obviously impossible. Like there's definitely some secrets in there, right? But it can be applied to everyone. It's not like, everyone's probably going to, AI, CS, things like that. Whereas like you could be the top dog in nutrition, and that doesn't mean you're competing. You don't have to be the top dog in the world to be the top dog in nutrition, and you could find secrets there and apply it there. So some interesting things on how to find secrets and apply them, I guess.
and the thing about secrets is they're meant to be difficult to find, right? They're not just, if it's just easy to find, then someone would have already figured it out, right?
Right.
So, and Steve Jobs figuring out that people wanted iPhones, like I think Ben told me that he went off the face of the planet and meditated and did all of that, and he probably through just thinking a lot and really deep introspection realized maybe where the future was heading in terms of technology. So that's just to point out that Steve just didn't decide that we wanted iPhones, but he reflected, then decided. But so executing secrets, who do you tell? You have two options. You can't keep it to yourself. You need to tell people, right? So some of us find a secret and we think, I just have to tell someone else, or you know, you don't tell anybody. Those are your two options. So you can tell someone or you can't. Well, like I mentioned, you shouldn't really keep it to yourself because you need other people's help to actually execute on that secret. But you don't want to tell everybody. If everyone knows, then someone actually may steal that secret, someone malicious. There's always a golden mean between telling everybody and telling nobody. That's a company. That's a Peter Thiel quote. So what do? Build a startup and tell whoever you need and no more. Use your secret to make the world a better place.
I like that. Like the secret was it was a good idea. I liked how he framed it because it made me realize that a lot of not only what people do, but even myself, it's like, oh, like let me go try to get these degrees, and then like I'll get these degrees, and then I'll be able to do something. It's like no, you got it wrong. Just get a degree and then go do something. Like you know what I mean? Like don't worry about it so much.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like, I think for me, it put in perspective like what a company is. Like I
Mm,
learned originally that at first, my evolutions of thinking of a company. A company starts off to me when I was in high school was I need to make money. You start a company to make money. Then you realize that you start a company to solve a problem. But then Peter Thiel puts in a sense like you start a company to solve a problem. That's a secret because if the problem isn't a secret, you're in a saturated market. And just that like stepping through, just thinking about how my thought of seeing a company has evolved, it's very interesting. And I like this because it's like puts in a way it's like, yeah, I kind of do need to find something not too obvious because the people that always walk up that like at least there's some people that they come up to me and they'll tell me like a business idea or something. It's like, what are you gonna tell me for? Am I an investor or
yeah.
something? Like, thank you for the compliment, I guess. But it's like, okay, you want to connect people so they can use another social media app.
Yeah.
It's like another social media idea. Like no
Like that's
one's gonna
not
down. Like that's not a secret. Like Mark Zuckerberg figured that out. It's like you need to find something new. So I really like that. But in this debriefing part of the episode, I want us to pose questions to each other.
you want me to start or do you want to start?
You should start.
All right, my question for this debrief is how much control over your life is optimal for you to succeed? And the reason I asked that is because we kind of talk about how like you want to think you have more control than you actually do, right? Because in that regard, you will try to exert more control on things in your life, and you will probably be more successful because of it. But one thing that I was thinking about was, um, is it when is thinking you can control when is your sphere of control too big that it actually becomes detrimental, right? In the sense that if I think I can control a lot of things that I can't control, and let's say that like over stresses me out because I think I can control something but I really can't, and so I'm worried about all these things that I really can't do anything about. It's like, at what point, where do I find the Goldilocks of how much I should try to control?
um Control what you can control. Like, it's like, I mean, I guess it's the stoic point of view of being like, yes, you want to exert as much control over everything, like over anything that you can control. Like, you want to have 100%. Like, if I can wake up super, super early every single day and be consistent, like, I want to do that every
Hmm.
single day, right? If I can, always get 100 on this, on like, if I know, like, to get a really good grade in a class, I just have to read this textbook, do the practice problems, do the homeworks, review my notes before an exam, and I will do good. And I need to control that because I can control, right? But let's say you take a class where the professor just doesn't put, like, all the material in the book and the lectures aren't really exactly tied to that quiz, or there's not really a way for you to do everything to prepare for it. So then at that point, it's, well, you can't control what's going to be on the quiz. You can just control anything you could do at that point. It's like, okay, whatever, right? So the two spectrums that you have is that you have a quiz where you will know everything you need to if you do all the work, and then another spectrum where you won't know everything even if you do all the work.
Hmm.
So it's like, are you gonna like, for me? And I'm posing this because I literally went through this semester where in my CS class, I'm in the point, like, my previous CS class, like, I would do all the reading and do all that work, and I would know, and I would be well prepared for the quiz. And this course, it's an independent inquiry, right? So it's like, you can do the work, but it's not really even outlined what work you should be doing,
Hmm.
and you don't really know what's going to be on the quiz because it's made like week by week, and it's not even consistent from semester to semester with the
Right.
professor. And so I was so worried about, well, oh, like, what should I be doing? Is my grade? And it was just like way stressing me over. And slowly my grade just went from like a 90. I got like a 90, an 85, a 70, a 60 on the quiz. And I finally was like, I just don't care. Like, I'm just going to do what I can, and I just don't care.
And so that's kind of my point, though, right? It's like, I guess the deeper question is what constitutes being in control of something, or what does control mean in the sense of like yeah, you can't control what your professor does, of course, but it's like, is it is it possible, or is it likely that you exerting more control over or trying to do more would get you a better quiz grade? And it's like, yeah, like, of course, like in this example, the quiz grade, like you have other things to do. It's like not that important, but it's like if that thing is very important, right? Like, there's a lot of things surrounding like, trying to build a company or a startup or something that are just super variable. You just don't know. There's a lot of things you just can't control. But is it possible that like in an irrational view of how much you should control could actually contribute to you doing better? But then it's like, where do you find that? Like, when is it too irrational and when is it not irrational enough? I guess that's kind of where I was going with that
Is it
question.
too rare? I think if you're thinking you can control the outcome, then that's irrational. And I think it's like, you can only control your input, and then whatever the output
Is what it is.
is where you learn, and then you just, like, it's like, you control your input, you see what the output is, and you adjust, and then you repeat.
Right.
What are your thoughts, though? Like, do you think that, like, how much control is there actually, like, can you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hard. Like for me, it was I posed it because I didn't know the answer. Actually, I just wanted to just want to explore it and see what we think, and I think I definitely lean towards like more the more rational you are with your control in terms of like how much you can control, the better off you are in a lot of ways. I think a part of that is also your stress tolerance. So for me, I have a pretty high like stress tolerance. I can handle a lot, and I'm just kind of like I just shrug my shoulders. I'm like, cool,
Yeah.
like we'll get it done. No worries. Hopefully. So it's kind of, for your health, your physical, mental health, like how much can you handle, of, being let down by things that are out of your control, but you think are in your control type. So somewhere along those lines, it's definitely, I think it's a personal experience thing. But it's just something to think about, only, not just for startups, but for yourself as well. But what's your question, Mel?
My question is, why has most of society become so comfortable with the idea that all knowledge is widely known? People are so quick to believe information that scientists tell us, and not saying that you should disregard what a scientist tells you because they study something and do it for a long time, but you shouldn't take it as fact. Like people are so quick to take it as like the laws of physics, you know. So why do you think most of society has become so comfortable with the idea that like all knowledge is like widely known? Like they just think that someone says something that is credible, that it's the fact that it's just law.
I guess just for clarity, like, are you saying we've become more trusting in knowledge than like societies used to be? So like society today is more of like we're just kind of like someone says something and we're just kind of like, yeah, it's true. Whereas societies previously were more skeptical.
Yeah, and that yeah, like yeah, that's the best way to put it. And then also, just for more perspective, what Peter Thiel says, like many of us act as if all that could be known is known.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I think a big part is that like I don't know about you guys, but a lot of times it feels like it's like who am I? Who am I to like think that I can go discover new things? And it's like I kind of impart that view sometimes on like the rest of the world. It's like, oh well, if I'm not like learning, everything that I learn is something that someone else has already like created or like known. So it's like if I'm not creating anything original, it's like, well, the rest of the world probably isn't, right? And then from there, I think it's kind of a big part of it's probably also laziness in the internet. It's like, well, if everything's on the internet, like everything must be known, right? It's kind of like just Google it, bro. Like it's
Hmm.
all on Google. Like they know, it's like it's
Yeah,
kind of this feeling that everything's there. But it's definitely a deep question in the sense like I don't. It's a hard
I
question. Like
think
I think
you,
those are
I
two
think you
things,
almost,
but
I think you almost pointed towards an answer, not like the answer, but like one of potential answers is that because of like Google and just how much access of information we have, that we assume that the information is probably out there or that knowledge is already out there. Like, and that
right.
knowledge is already known because we can just search it with our thumbs. When before, if the only way you could know something was to have access to a library, there was a lot more of, well, I know I don't know because I don't have access to that information.
Mm,
And so today it's like, well, I have access because you have access to that information. People will just think that they just because people have access to that information, they will just think that, oh, I don't have to look if that information is actually out there and how accurate it is because I can, right? It's like so the ability of searching for that information has almost made us go backwards. Or it's like we have more access to information, but we start to just believe all the information because we're like, well, everybody has the same access to information, so
right.
therefore no one's checking it. And it's like this cycle when it's like before, if no, like because you didn't know because you didn't have a library next to you and only rich people could, it's either you had to like trust in face value, and if people have lived in the society long enough, they realize that like you can't really trust all the rich people or the institutions. And so it's like
I think another big effect too is that with the advent of the internet, we've become much more aware of just the sheer volume of information that exists. It's like even people that used to have libraries, they probably didn't fully. I mean, we don't fully understand, but they probably didn't have a grasp of how much information there is as we do as a society today. And it's like, I mean, you could just pick a very niche topic, type it into Google, and you will get more search hits and more information than you could read in a year. So it's like if you do that for everything, it's like that awareness of how much information there is like, oh my gosh, that's so overwhelming. How could we not know everything?
and because of the internet and having so much access to information, that is why AI has become so important. It's literally just an extension of our ability because our brains just can't handle that amount of information, that we've
Right.
kind of had to offload the processing of all that information to something that just has more computational power than our brain, which is really interesting to think about. Like these two questions themselves could be a whole like exploration in
For
this
real.
pod, but there's a lot more to this book, and we have to talk about the foundations of a company.
So I like how he says it. He calls it, his friends call it Thiel's law. And it's actually just
Wait,
true for a lot of things. Go
Ben,
ahead.
I hope one day that you just be like, yeah, no, this is our Mel's law, and then I'll have a Ben's law. I'll be like, yeah, you know Ben's law. Yeah. So sorry, keep
That's
going.
actually, could you imagine having a law named after you? Yes, yeah, it's my law actually.
It's
And it's not even like a government law. No, it's like this is just a law of like life. You know what I mean? It's just law.
it's
Like
just yeah. If I write it in a book and so enough people read it, it's
yeah.
just gonna be law.
So this is Theo's law. A startup messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed. This, it seems like a very obvious statement to me, but I think it's something that a lot of people overlook, including myself as well. Like, I never really thought about it, but I was like, yeah, when he said that, I'm like, that's definitely true. Like a startup, like if you don't get the foundations right, the long term success of your company is just you're never going to overcome that, right? Like bad decisions made at the beginning are going to propagate throughout the life of your company or whatever you're starting, and it's just never it's never going to work out, right? So a good example of this of a good foundation is actually the Constitution. This is the Constitution has lasted 250 years to this day. We actually have scores of people. Basically the whole judicial system is dedicated to interpreting the Constitution, right? We even have different types of interpretations for the Constitution. It's actually kind of funny. They'll be like, no, I'm a literal, like I interpret literally how it's written. It's like, no, I interpret it. People are like, oh, I interpret it how I think the founding fathers meant it to be when they wrote it. And this is very complicated for something that was. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. But it just shows you how foundational and how well built the Constitution was because we've built such an amazing country in like 250 years. Of course, we have flaws. That's like with anything, but on the whole, I think we've done a great job, especially in moving and progressing. Right. Um, Now, the most important thing about your company is who you build it with. Choosing a co-founder is like getting married, right? He talks, founder conflicts, as he mentions, are just as ugly as like getting a divorce. And he says founders need to have prehistory before they start a company, meaning, they need to have, be friends. They need to really have some type of connection before they even just jump in and try to make a company. And he gives an example of this. One of his co-founders at PayPal, I think it was Luke Nosek. He wanted to build his own startup after PayPal, and he found this dude at I don't know some networking event. It was like this MBA type dude, and they tried to start a company, and they just met, and they're like, we're gonna send it, and the company just totally flopped because the foundation was built on people who didn't really know each other that well, and if the people don't know each other that well, like a company is just a group of people, like we said, trying to take a secret and use it to change the world in some small or large way, right? And so if the people, if that foundation, those relationships aren't strong, it's never going to work.
And that's interesting, especially the idea of choosing a co-founder is like getting married. I think my girlfriend is gonna be pretty jealous about how much time I have to spend with Ben as we go in this endeavor of starting our own startup.
She'll have to live with it. What can I say?
Interests need to be aligned in a startup. This is really important because you're playing a long-term game and you want the incentives to all aim towards the long future, right? So there's different types of kind of align interests in a company. There's ownership, possession, and control. Founders aren't the only ones who need to get along. So there's, like I said, there's three types of people in your company. There's those that own the company, and that's anyone with equity. So that's founders, investors, employees, stockholders. There's those that possesses the company, and that's anyone who operates it day to day, and that's employees and founders. And then there's the third type, those that control the company, anyone who governs the company's affairs, board of directors, founders, and investors. Now, these three groups need to be aligned with each other. Why? Let me give you an example. So, a typical big corporation, right? The CEO controls much of the company. Remember, control means that the company, having control of the company means that they're the ones who have governing of the company, making decisions of where the company is going to head, really, right? And so, CEOs have a lot of control of the company, but in big corporations, when it's like not the founder CEO, but just a new like MBA type of CEO, they have a trivial amount of ownership, meaning a small amount of ownership. of the company. And so this incentivizes the CEO to think short term in terms of short term rewards, because a lot of times these new CEOs, they'll get rewarded based on how the company does on a quarterly basis, and that ties to their salary. So this makes them cut corners, cut costs, to post those good quarterly results. And this is an easy thing to do, but it sacrifices the company's health, and ability to prosper in the long term. And so employees that, and another way to look at it is employees that possess much of the company, and possessing, and a group of people that possess the company are anyone that operates it day to day. And so employees that possess the company only, they're incentivized to just clock in and clock out. They're like, I'm going to do what I need to do for that day. And most of the times people are going to always try to do things with the least amount of effort, the law of least effort. And so they'll waste amount of time, and everything like that. They'll waste a lot of time. So, but the thing is, for most startups, because the example I give you was big corporations, but for most startups, this isn't an issue. The beginning, the founders own, possess, and control the company, right? The issues when it comes to growing, when you have to add people and make sure that you properly divide and make sure those divisions are all incentivized. So the point here is choose everyone you work with wisely. One bad apple can ruin the whole orchard. That is such a corny line, Ben. Ben writes the points here.
I don't know why it was a quote from the book. I don't know what you want me to say. Like, it is. Anyways, moving on. He said all that just to emphasize that who you start a company with. Will you stop laughing at me? Who you start a company with is very important. And a few more tips when starting a company, and especially with people. I like how he says this. He says you're either on the bus or you're off the bus, meaning you're either involved with the company or you're not, right? There's no part-time, no remote, no consultants. There should be very few exceptions to this, right? Anyone who doesn't hold stock options or isn't on a paid salary is fundamentally misaligned with your company, right? Because they don't care about you. They're not getting anything from you except, maybe just like a check, right? And even to some extent, that's your employees, but especially if, you're a consultant. Yeah.
Like those on a contract, once the contract's over, they don't ever have to care about you.
There are a couple exceptions. He talks about hiring outside lawyers and accountants. That's probably like one of the best, just because like accountants, I mean, like you don't really need them to be that. They're not doing like the heavy lifting for like creating the product. They're just making sure you don't get in trouble with Uncle Sam. So, again, you're either on the bus or off the bus. Second thing is use ownership to incentivize employees. You see this a lot with big tech. I know, with like Google or other like FANG companies. They give especially young employees like stock options. Is that how it works?
Yeah,
for
yeah,
like
and it's
4
almost
years?
like at this point, all tech companies do that, and they base it so if you come in as a software engineer, they'll give you stock options, which would be part of like your total compensation, and that'll be like, and the way they incentivize you to stay there for longer is that you don't get all the stocks in just that, and right when you sign, they like vest it over 4 years, meaning that they give it to you over a period of 4 years.
Right. And so that incentivizes the employees to really invest in the company and be invested in the product that they're making, not just show up every day for a salary, right? The last thing is that CEOs should not have high salaries. If you think about this, this actually makes a lot of sense, especially when you're in the beginning of a company, right? Because the CEO pay really sets the bar for everyone else. So if the CEO, and he says this, if the CEO makes less than every single person in the company, people take notice of that. And that's important because, the employees see that the CEO or, the founders, they really believe in the company, right? Like they're not here just for a paycheck, or they're not here to just extract as much from their employees and then use that to pay themselves and have, a big house or whatever. Like they're here to create something, and they really believe in what they're creating. And, they're giving their employees, they're paying them more as a way to, symbolize that they not only trust in the company, but they trust their employees as well. So that was an important point. But now it's time for probably, at least for Mel, one of the most interesting parts of the episode, and I feel like for you guys too, these 7 startup questions that you have to answer.
Everyone loves to know, like, give me the steps. Tell me exactly what I need to do to, become successful, especially when starting a startup. I'll make it clear. These aren't it. there's no such thing as a clear steps, because starting a startup is creating something new, and there is no formula or plan for creating something new. But there are questions that you must ask yourself to make sure that your idea and what you're starting is solid. Number one is the engineering question. So for those that are engineers, especially if you're building a tech company, can you create a breakthrough technology instead of incremental improvements? You need proprietary technology orders of magnitude better than the near substitute. 2x improvement won't cut it. Oh my God, my thing does it 20% better.
Who
No,
cares?
exactly. You need 10x improvement. Why? Because 20% improvement sounds nice, but when you actually are making the technology, um, you don't account for a bunch of different things like manufacturing costs. That will cut into that 20%. What expenses do you have to pay? And those can eliminate that 20% improvement. Will people actually switch for just 20% better? Because at these nowadays, people get thrown so many numbers and exaggerated claims that not everyone believes it. So a 10x improvement is the best way to go because all extra costs are already factored in and all the risk. So even after everything happens, worst of the worst, you still can achieve 2 to 3x better, 2 to 3x product improvement for the customer. The second is the timing question. Is right now the right time to start your particular business? This is one of the most difficult questions to answer. It's very difficult to know what the right time is. The future is unknown. So some questions you want to ask is technology improving this market? Is society ready for my product? Is the market already too saturated? Timing question is probably one of the most important because iPhones weren't the first touchscreen phones. There's actually some phones that came out way before that, but the timing, they were like 20 years off. So you might have the right technology, the right engineering, but you might just be too early. So think about it.
Yeah, and so the third question, and just a quick side note, there's no particular order to these questions, and you don't need to answer like you don't have to home run all of these, but you do need to make sure you get most of them.
And if you can home run all of them,
I mean,
increase your chance.
yeah, for sure. But it's unlikely that you'll actually home run all seven. It's pretty hard. But the third one is the monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? Large markets, like we talked about last episode, are just ruthless in competition, right? So if you try to come into a market that's huge, especially if you have big, power players like big tech, Google, Apple, things like that, like you're just going to get destroyed, honestly. You need to pick a niche market, right? Or a market segment that you can actually dominate, and then from there expand outward. The fourth question is the people question. We went over this, so we're not going to talk about it too much, but do we have the right team? Right? If you're creating technical product, you need a technical team, and so that was one of the big things. But pretty much all the stuff we talked about before. So in terms of is everyone aligned? Are you on the bus? Are you off the bus? Who are the founders? Who are your employees? Do they believe in your product? Those questions are going to matter. The distribution question. Do you have a way not just to create, but to deliver your product? If you can't deliver your product, like literally get it to your customer in a good way, it's useless. It doesn't matter how good your product is if the consumer never touches it, right? So some questions to think about are, do you know how you'll deliver your product? Is your delivery, including supply chain, reliable? Is it clear where customers should go to buy your product? Is the buying process simple and easy? Has your marketing communicated all of this information to the customer effectively? So this is actually one of those questions where I think it's more important than I at first give it credit for, and it can be very much easily overlooked.
Distribution, and then there is the durability question. Will your market position be defensible 10 to 20 years into the future? You must analyze and critically think about trends to stay ahead of the competition. This is important because if your company won't last in 10 to 20 years, what is the point? Questions to ask yourself. What large trends or shifts are taking place in society? What new technologies are being developed? How many companies fit into the market landscape now and into the future? Preferably, you want not a lot of companies in that market space, at least when you're starting. The secret question. Have you identified a unique opportunity that others don't see? Let that sink in. Because another social media app. It's not gonna do it, man. Can we just stop with that?
Not gonna cut it, bro.
I swear, it's like on campus, the fizz thing, or
Oh yeah, the jacket was not. I actually like the jacket. It fits me well, and I just like it's black, so it's like it goes with everything. But anyways, yeah, the fizz ain't it, bro.
the
I've never
app
actually used the
idea.
app.
Yeah, no. If even they made me download it, I would have deleted it. Case study. Let's do it real quick. Tesla. See how they answer all of these. Number one, technology. They're so good, other companies rely on their parts. I don't know what company this is. Is it Daimler?
Daimler, maybe.
Daimler. So some other company uses Tesla's battery packs. Mercedes uses Tesla's powertrains. Toyota uses Tesla's motors. Really? Like, come on. They
I
don't show
mean,
you the technology is better. Tesla's biggest advantage is its ability to integrate many components into one superior product. So all these other companies are using different parts of their product, while Tesla combines them all to make a superior product. And then also want to add, Tesla's AI is decades ahead of the competition, and I mean like it is like ridiculous just how far ahead they are.
I would like to mention that this information about the technology came straight from the book, so it could be a couple years outdated. I am not totally sure, but when he wrote this was true, and this was written not too long ago. But just
Yeah.
just short disclaimer for that.
The Tesla AI part was for me just because I just know how far ahead they are. And I'll put it in perspective for you guys. Tesla has been collecting data while people drive of like the roads and stuff, so that they can push to self driving, because they're not just making electric cars; they're trying to make self driving cars. Um, they've been doing this for like 5 to 10 years ahead of everybody else. Think about that: 10 years of data collection. If you know anything about AI, the amount of data you have is the most important thing. So that is definitely a big advantage. Now, second is timing. In January 2010, Tesla secured a 465 million loan from the Department of Energy. This was a one-time opportunity, and the reason why answers the timing question is because the government was backing it, and so that was like a big indication. Like, yeah, it's probably time that even the government wants to switch to solar. And if you understand, almost every single government in the country, not solar but renewable, or clean energy, almost every single country in the world depends on like oil and gas. Like, it's just what we are, but we're shifting away from it. Third, the monopoly. Tesla began making high-end electric sports cars. They're very specific. Now the company has expanded to not just cars and like electric cars, but self-driving cars, energy company. Now even Tesla bought robot AI company. So you have to start small and prove that you can dominate in something small before you expand. The team, one, you have Elon Musk.
Enough said.
It's like Michael Jordan in the world of business. But the thing that makes Tesla so great is that Elon pushes to make sure that he only hires the best. And something he says is, if you're at Tesla, you're choosing to be at the equivalent of special forces. If you're going to work at Tesla, you're choosing to step up your game. Pushing for the best talent is always going to be the right thing to do when building your team. And then fifth is distribution. Tesla owns their entire distribution chains. They're not like most car companies. You don't go buy a Tesla from a car dealership. You go buy a Tesla directly from Tesla, which helps them control their customer experience when they're buying the product. Six is durability. Tesla is, like I mentioned, ahead of the electric car industry just in terms of what it looks like. And this, when you're the first, especially in this movement, they're not the first to make electric vehicles, but but it's like Peter mentioned, the last mover advantage. They're the last movers into the space, so they're making much better products as they've seen where everybody else failed. The amount of data they have collected, still want to stress this. It is when everything is going to move to self-driving. This is my thesis. Everything is going to move to self-driving. Humans are not going to be allowed to drive anymore, and that is for the better. Like, simply put, that is for the better. And they're just way ahead. Way ahead. Last is secrets. Tesla knew that clean energy, clean tech and electric cars were in, but they knew that everyone wanted to not just save the world, but look cool while doing it. Like, today I saw a Tesla Model S, and I was like, yeah, that just looks cool. Like, that
Yeah,
car
it
just looks
does.
so like just sexy. I'm not a fan of the Model 3s. Like, and more like the Model 3s look like more SUVs. Like, I want more of like the sedans, like the clean. Like, that's the
Yeah.
Model S. But it's definitely on the pricier side of all of them. So that is the seven startup questions that you must ask, and that is how Tesla. That's a Tesla case study. But now let's debrief on everything we just talked about.
Yeah, so the question that I have for this debrief, and it's kind of it's low-key a rhetorical question that I wanted to make just because I think it's important. If you're building a company chiefly to make money, how often do you think you'll succeed?
I wish there was a statistic about it because, like, anyone, I feel like it's probably a low number, but at the same time, anyone that builds a company that's successful, they won't say like, "Oh, I was just in it for the money." But unless you meet like, I don't know, like, no, I would say that there's two types of people. I remember when I was first coming up and like really looking into business, and this is like high school. I would go online and like got on like the whole drop shipping, like the whole YouTube, like make money online. Like those dudes, like they're probably just in it straight for the money,
Facts.
right? And so, but they're not like they're successful in compared to like every like they might be actually making maybe making a few millions, like right, they're maybe net worth around like a couple millions, a little on below 10 million, right? But when we're talking about like startups and building these type of companies, like you're not going to just build a couple $1 million company that's actually going to be considered a failure. Like you're going to build something most of the times it's going to end up being worth hundreds of millions and something like that, where but it's like that isn't what people that are building those companies aim for. They aim to do something and build a product that people really, really want and that solve a problem and that is a secret in the world. But then they get rewarded proportionally to what type of impact and secret and problem they solved. So it's like I don't know the question and I don't know the answer to that, but it's probably low and it's just not in the order of magnitude that you are like if you really want, that big success, you want to
Right.
do something big.
Yeah, that's because it's definitely true. You can succeed if your chief goal is money. I would say you probably won't end up happy. That's just an opinion of mine. But success and happiness aren't necessarily the same, of course. And and like you said, which is a good point, like the top 1% of companies that do succeed, I'm almost I can pretty much guarantee you none of those people started it because they just wanted money, right? Like they started it because they're invested in creating something that they truly believed in and that they thought would really impact the world.
And it's because it's so difficult to build like an actual startup and not just like
Right.
a, drop shipping company or online marketing advertisement. If you do those things, like that's great. Like, you're making your money, but like do you even ask you have to be honest, like you're not doing anything like that you would say like, "Oh, I'm, solving some specific problem." Maybe you are like business is a weird thing because you can be every business is solving some type of problem or else nobody would actually want it, right? Or they're giving some type of service that people want. But the question is like, how fulfilling do you feel about what you're
Yeah.
doing?
Like
And last thing I was gonna say is that on the idea of like you won't be happy, that is so true in the fact that you can do things just for the money, but you might not like this is actually what I was gonna say. People can do things just for the money, but the idea of capitalism that makes it great is that you're only gonna get money if you give what people want or you give people a service or a product that they want. So in that way, even when you are chasing the money specifically, you'll eventually I feel like you'll reach a point where you have to realize that you can't just chase the money. You can't just make anything to make the money. You have to start actually thinking about other people. You could still be selfish and completely purely motivated by the money. That's why you make something that people want. So it's like either way, it's gonna always come back to that. But at the end, you're not gonna be happy because you didn't do it for the best reasons.
right. I honestly don't have much to add. That was good analysis, Mel. Beast.
Philosopher brain. No, but my question is, what makes long-term thinking so difficult for people?
I would almost frame the question like differently as like why would you think long term? Like why would that be the
Time out.
natural thing?
Time out. We read Jordan Peterson, and this man just was like, "Let me bust it out real quick." The question isn't why aren't you happy? Why aren't you suffering all the time?
No, that's how cute I was thinking
That's
about.
literally what Jordan Peterson
Yeah.
like framed it. But no, go on. So
I think it's the more natural frame actually. I genuinely think that, like, like, why, what would convince people that thinking long term is a good option? Because the default is definitely short term, right? Because there's a lot of I know a lot of people, especially our age, who are just kind of like, I'm just here living in the moment. I hate when people say this. I hate when people are like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. And I'm like, I get when you say it like as a joke, but I can tell when people don't say it as a joke, and it kind of bugs me because I'm like, what do you mean a good time, not a long? I don't even know, like, what if you're here for that implies that, like, you're here for right now, and that's creating like bad consequences in the future, right? So it's like, if you're here for a good time, not a long time, you're gonna have a good time now, and you're gonna have a awful time in the future, right? And then you'll die. It's like, what? Like, that doesn't, your logic. Anyways, that was a tangent. I'm sorry, but
No, that's so true
it
though.
was just it just whenever I hear that, I'm like, you're just not even thinking right now. Like,
Yeah.
that's my opinion. Sorry, but
No,
it is what it
that's
is.
so true. Because you think long, they're literally just describing exactly. It's like you're chasing short term satisfaction, and you really just stated that in the long term it's gonna be painful, and then it's just gonna all end.
Exactly. Like, you just, I can't with sometimes people. I don't know. But back to the question, like, what, what, why is it so hard to think long term? And it's because it's not natural. Kind of like going back to, you mentioned Jordan Peterson. It's like, it's really hard to convince yourself that sacrificing, present day you will get you some total more benefit on your life, for your future, right? It's like, it's hard to convince your present self of that, because you just want to, like, sit on the couch, vegetate, watch Netflix, and, like, eat, I don't know, whatever it is people want to do, like, do your thing, whatever floats your boat. But yeah, what do you think, Mel?
Uh, Long term thinking, because I'm definitely a long term thinker. Um, and I think the point you made is true because like we've reread Jordan Peterson's book, and he explained it beautifully why people think short term and why that is our natural state to do so. And the idea that it's hard for people to understand that sacrificing now will be better for them in the future could be to the fact of like people not having good role models into one they've never seen someone else do that. They never looked up to someone that does that, because if you look up to, like, let's say like rappers or something, like, or NBA players, like you don't, they get their money pretty like straightforward, and they don't have the best, like, they're all wearing these chains, and like they're all living really a short term super luxurious life, but they can do that because they're making that amount of money at that time, right? But whenever that thing falls out, how many of them are still living that type of life, right? So role models, not having good role models, big one. Another one I would say is people. I truly believe this is people not wanting to have those difficult conversations with themselves, because that is what long term thinking is that one, it's like, it's a bit of a, what people like to call manifesting now. Like, people like to manifest. Like, people are starting to search to get it. Like, let me manifest. I want to manifest. It's like short term thinking, but it's spoken like they want to think long term. That's
Yeah,
how I view
I
manifesting.
don't really like manifesting as a
People are
word.
like, they're like, I want to manifest it. So they say what they want to be in a short term, but it's longer term than them thinking now. But people don't actually want to have like those difficult conversations themselves of like, well, what do I actually want in the long term, right? Like, what actually is a good long term future? What do people do to make sure that they're good long term? So it's role models and not having those difficult conversations with yourself that will cause people, in my opinion, to not think long term.
How's the manifest thing was actually a really good point, because when now you say that, when I hear someone say, like, I'm manifesting, it's like, to me that just sounds like you're repeating something that you wish would happen. Like, it's almost just a wish. You're just like, yeah, I'm manifesting, but it's like, that sounds like, that sounds like you're not doing anything really. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like you're just chilling, like, thinking about it but not doing anything. Like, that's what that sounds like to me. So I don't know. Good points. You have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No, not too much. I'm looking through the book if you're watching on YouTube because I forgot to put a quote in. I forgot to put a quote. So, but Armel, don't worry. It's
Don't worry.
Armelicus Milius.
You,
We
you can
always
have
find one.
you can have a few. You got like maybe 30 or 40 seconds while I do the rapid recap, and then
Uh,
you know how it goes.
Last thing I want to end is this. I like this format, especially the
Yeah.
questions, and this is a good format. I think we found the format.
I
people.
think this is like, I think this is the format. Yeah.
And we're right around an hour, and I think really,
Honestly,
just
I
like an
think for
hour.
us to flesh out ideas, I think it takes us that long.
Yeah, it just takes a good hour. So, thank you guys for listening. I don't think I mentioned if you can like, subscribe, and share. I need to do this at the beginning. That'll be such a blessing. Leave a rating, a review if you can. But Ben, take us to the recap.
So, recapping the episode, we started off talking about how you are not a lottery ticket. Main point there was that you should not believe that luck is a big part of success, because you want to exert as much control as possible over your life to be able to be successful. Essentially, the more control you think you have, the more control you actually have. The next thing was talked about secrets. Secrets are inventions. They're tech. They're what gives you the advantage to create something new, and what gives you a dominant share of a marketplace. And a lot of us don't believe in secrets anymore due to geography, or there's no more physical places left, so we're not exploring ideas anymore. But it's important to find secrets, and once you find them, you need to tell the minimal number of people, which is a company, and use that to really change the world and impact it in some way. The second half of the episode was talking a lot about foundations. So foundations are extremely important. Without a good starting point, if your foundation is off, the company is doomed from the beginning, right? And the most important thing is who you start your company with. Now, the 7 startup questions, I can go through them real quick just as a review. We have the engineering question. Can you create breakthrough technology instead of incremental improvements? The timing question. Is now the right time to start your particular business? The monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? The people question. Do we have the right team? The distribution question. Do you have a way not just to create, but to deliver your product? The durability question. Will your market position be defensible in 10, 20 years into the future? And the secret question. Have you identified a unique opportunity that others don't see? So that's what we talked about this episode. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. And now it's time for my favorite part of the episode, a quote from Armelicus Milius.
It's tapping into my Aristotle, Socrates. No, I'm kidding. A quote from Peter Thiel. We cannot take for granted that the future will be better, and that means we need to work to create it today. You're not a lottery ticket. Startup is what is going to create the future. I tweeted out. You should follow me on Twitter if you haven't. Armel W. Tala. Starting a startup is like investing in startups is betting on the future. Starting a startup is obviously wanting to make that future happen. So startups are cool. You should definitely do it.
Yeah.
Should definitely do one. And we are. So with all that being said, thank you guys for listening. It's been an absolute honor. I hope you guys have liked this format. Also with discussions, we're going to have discussions, not for every book, but for books that we think need to have a discussion. And most of these discussions may even take place during these debriefs. So this was a really good episode. I really enjoyed the conversation we had. Check out all the links below. And until next time, peace.